surrounding towns are all under wastewater management, and luckily we're not.
Right.
So this
Because
is
of our
being
size.
more or less the proactive, not reactive.
Yep.
And I had read something last year that the DEP was looking to finalize a rule in the upcoming future that basically phase out sand for a large part of the state.
They've been trying to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people have the traction, but honestly, if you use salt correctly, you don't need salt. You don't need sand.
And this
And
would-
another big advantage in cost savings is the sweeping, elimination of the sweeping.
That's it. I got less sweeping. More or less, it would be a maintenance sweep. Honestly, our shoulders are very high, so even after we sweep now, people probably see sand on the roads, and that's because it rains and it comes off the side back onto the road. So until we're able to get there, clean the shoulders, and help the water get off the roads to stop our roads from, deteriorating, we'll have that. But it'll save on a lot of the sand going on people's lawns and them sweeping it, having to sweep it out onto the road. Our shoulders building up more and more than what they already are.
How about corrosivity? You're using all salt. You're
Yep,
gonna be a lot
the
more
treated
corrosive.
salt actually has an anti-corrosive, and it's going to be corrosive anyways. It's salt,
Yeah.
but the treated salt actually has like a molasses to it, so it helps with the corrosion. Lead Salt is the contractor that we're using this year, and they actually have a little less percentage in their treated to help with the corrosion, believe it or not. Drain cleaning is going to help us on drain cleaning. We're not going to have all that sand in our drains
Yep.
to virtually where we might not even have to, other than leaves going in there, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
No mixing of sand. I have a guy out there for a full week mixing sand, especially if we're on a storm back to back. I lose a guy.
Right.
And fuel and wear and tear on vehicles. Proactive on that, and then honestly, is that, like I said, 3 times they've come back to fill up a truck. I did the math, and it comes out to that they would actually leave the barn once and come back with a half a truck to check their whole area.
Say that again. They would leave the barn.
They would leave the barn topped off and come back with half.
Why? Just because of the route?
Because it takes me 22 tons of salt to do that.
Oh,
It's 10. I'm putting 10 tons in each truck.
right. So to get the appropriate amount of salt on
So that
each
I got
per
5
lane
trucks
run.
out there,
I understand.
including myself.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, I still think, if you wouldn't mind, I'm
Mhm.
still a little confused on how it can be such a big savings.
I just showed you it though.
I still didn't
The
get it.
78 tons is what we're putting up for salt on the roads.
Yeah.
That just goes to show you what the sand is inhibiting the salt.
Okay.
You get what I mean?
I guess I do.
Sand has
Volume, you just have such a big
absolutely
volume.
no benefit other than people would say traction. But salt will give you the same benefit
Okay.
if used properly.
So to make all the passes with enough material that's down there requires a lot more, because of the sand's presence, it requires a lot more salt has to be in there.
It's an insulator.
Okay.
Salt wants to work on sun, water, heat. And with the treated salt, it goes down to -6. With standard rock salt, it's 10 degrees. We've used the treated salt in the past. It's made a big difference. We have such different climates through the town, really cold spots.
Yep.
And it's worked well. And now that we're able to, like I said, treat more times during the course of the storm, I think you're going to see the roads looking much nicer.
And I think that may be the reason why sometimes in the past we'd get to the town line, say Barry or something, and that was melted and Hubbardston wasn't. It was
Yeah.
because of this fact.
Well, like I said, we would pre-treat, you plow it. You can plow it up to about twice, and then your chemicals off the road. That's where you could actually turn it down and just actually sprinkle it on. You don't actually have to give it a full treatment.
Yep.
That gives it enough to break up the ice that's packed to the ground before it packs, so when you come back again with the plow, it plows it back off again. So, I mean, I've done some research on it.
Depending on the temperature drops, you're
Mhm.
gonna, if the temperature's colder, obviously the salt is less effective. So some cold storms, say it's 10 degrees, 0 to 10 degrees, you might have to put out more than 250 pounds
Yep.
per lane mile, so you'll adjust accordingly.
Yep.
You're not gonna have one set rule that this is
No,
what we're gonna do.
The guys understand. You
Okay.
know, I've talked with them. We have, even when we were doing the 50-50, I had explained in those past 2 storms that we had when we were plowing. I mean, you can tell when you treat the ones. I mean, that ice storm. I mean, you can never just say it's gonna be this, because
Yep.
every storm is different, and the longevity of it, the temperatures, everything changes everything. So I mean, during those storms, I told them, I said, keep your mains open, and then you plow them. If you see them start getting icy, I said, don't put a full treat on them. If we were putting down, we're 2 on the knob, we go to 1. It cuts it in half, and we just enough to sprinkle it down to keep it loose, so when we come back again to blow it off. So I mean, they've listened. I thought we did pretty decent on the last few storms.
Yeah,
so
everybody
I mean,
did.
So it's working, and now that we're gonna have something where we're actually putting less down and being able to apply it more than once, it's even better.
Okay.
Because I think it's, like I said, 2 to 3 times. Now I'm able to do it 5 times to 1.
All right.
go
Now,
for it.
one more question. I forgot to mention it during our last item. So you have a certain requirement, union-wise, that you, right?
I have 6 months.
You have 6 months. Okay, so we're what I'm getting at is we don't need to necessarily schedule another meeting right now. I don't think we need to, right? Anybody meaning another review?
No.
No.
No. Okay, that was it.
And Travis, could you tell the guys you appreciate the hard work they're doing, and it doesn't go unnoticed?
Yep. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks,
thank you.
Travis.
Thanks.
All right, our next item is Streeter Road residents to discuss the request to have the town take over the road. Are there Streeter Road residents here?
And several more around the corner.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, I'm Deb.
Dan Galanti, how you going?
Hi.
Hi,
Thank
Uncle
you
Stoner,
for-
how are you?
Thank you for meeting with us.
Poison Ivy.
Yet again.
That's your name, Poison Ivy?
No, I didn't want to shake her hand.
And I appreciate that, but I don't have to get it.
So if you wouldn't mind stating your name and your address.
I'm Debbie Reed, and I live at 16 Streeter Road.
Thank you. So,
So, some of probably what I'll say at the very beginning is things that you've no doubt heard before. There are a number of residents on our road who live on the Old Westminster end of things that were led to believe when they were building their homes that they were going to live on a town.
Excuse me, could the speaker just speak up a little because we can't hear him?
So
Thank you so much.
yeah, I'll try. That they thought they were going to live on a town road that was going to be finished and paved and taken care of by the town. That didn't happen. That was obviously before many, or if not all of you, came to the select board. So needless to say, they were disappointed about that. However, the town was able to provide us with temporary repairs over the years where they brought the grader in and was able to keep a crown on our road so that it held up fairly well with that type of a temporary repair. Then a number of years ago, I'd say maybe a little over 12 years ago, they stopped doing it altogether based on a Massachusetts state law that says towns are not supposed to maintain private roads.
okay.
At least that's my understanding, but I can't find the law anyplace, but I believe there is one. However, that still leaves us with the ongoing issue that we have, which is a continually raising the bar of how much we have to spend in order to get the road under the conditions that the town is looking for in order to plow us
And
every
can I ask you a
winter.
quick question?
Yep.
Do you have like a association?
We do not.
Okay.
So here's a $2,000 bill that we paid a few years ago. Sorry to say, somebody else has the last quote that we paid, which was $6,000. This year, we have gotten quotes for $11,000. We've also gotten a quote for $15,000 and another quote from last year for $20,000.
For all the same scope as
Basically the same
General.
scope of work. Bringing in fill and bringing a roller in, patching up the potholes. Well, $20,000 gets to be a lot of money if you have to outlay that every single year, as you can well imagine. So, in addition to that, not only, we do have a private road, but it's also well used by the public. We connect to town roads, and so the traffic that goes back and forth there is not just for the residents of Streeter Road, of which there are 25 homes, but it's well used by many other people in the town and not in the town. So we'd just like to see what could be resolved on our behalf so that we weren't paying these kinds of prices. And can only think that if it's gone from 2,000 to 20,000, what's it gonna be? Every year it gets to be not just doubled, but more than doubled. So that's kind of where we stand at this point. So what we'd like to propose is that based on the general bylaws of the town of Hubbardston, that we could in fact possibly have our road be taken over by the town without it being brought up to the DOT standards, which is what we have been told in the past had to happen. But your bylaws state that that doesn't have to happen. It says the town meeting may accept as a public way a way that does not meet all of the conditions set forth upon the above recommendation by a majority vote from the planning board to waive such conditions. Some time ago, I believe it was 2012, you actually recommended that the town take over the road and just leave it as a dirt road. I got that printed out someplace.
I may have, I don't remember. So-
And here it is right here, the highlighted section.
Hey, Brian, you were in this too.
So we're open to suggestions for the select board if you'd like to make any.
So it says, Mr. Stouter suggested taking over the road and leaving it as a dirt road. Mr. Bullock reported, normally you want the roads to be brought up to subdivision standard with drainage before accepting them. Mr. Castriotto suggested placing betterments on the road to bring it up to subdivision standard. So, since we have several members of the planning board here, I mean, certainly we want to do something to alleviate. This has been an ongoing issue for many, many years.
It really
but
has.
Vin or somebody can talk about better than certainly any of us can. What is the minimum standard for a road to be accepted?
Well, it's fairly well outlined in the bylaw as well as the subdivision control laws. Primarily, however, they speak directly to subdivision roads, which are new in town. We're talking about a private road now that's been in existence, that needs upgrading. And it basically has an opportunity, they have an opportunity with the planning board waivers to upgrade some of the road to some standards that would be affordable and agreeable to the town. It's a process. I think there's a good outline for it. We have a 2000 opinion from Joel Bard on how it should be done, and we've done it in the past, but it ultimately, requires a vote from the town meeting in order to accept it. It has to be brought up to better standards than it is now.
Vin, do you think it would require land takings, or could there be an issue with property lines?
I have no idea. I know it's a fairly wide road, and it's obviously got a very good gravel base, so it's got some advantages over a new road that's going in.
If excuse me, if, I don't know, if your plots are right up, if the property lines are right up to each other, and is there a road on your deed in the, on your front of your property? Or is it just the lots right face to face?
Dennis?
Dennis O'Donnell, Morgan Road, I apologize. My understanding is, the homeowners definitely correct me, that your property goes to the center of the road currently? Is that correct?
For
You think
some
so?
homes,
What's up? Okay.
So that would be my concern, is it may require a survey if it were to, if they were willing to.
So you'd have to have buy-in from everybody who does have that situation. Clearly, Brian can talk to this, there's a legal expense there, which I believe the homeowners would probably have to absorb, to get to that point in town, get it from town. This might be.
And when you say get in front of town, to Vin's point there, at town meeting for
Town
the
meeting,
town to accept it as a road.
Any road, anytime,
Right.
any place, yes.
And there are requirements for those easements to be granted, I think within 120 days of any town meeting before it's accepted. It can be awkward, but, if the residents on Street or Road are all in favor of it, I think it could be worked out. I'd strongly recommend us to try and work it out. I think it's in not only the best interest of the residents down on Street or Road, but, we've always been concerned about more revenue in the town, and it's an opportunity for real estate values to increase. It's lovely homes on Street or Road, and it's just a shame that real estate values are being, brought down by that dirt road that's very difficult to pass. And, it's fairly well used by everybody in town that goes into that northwest corner of town.
Yeah.
So Brian, you may have some more insight. I think we touched on it a little bit. You talked about easement. So if we have 90% of the homeowners who say yes, absolutely, take over that part of the road, my property be a road, and you have a couple holdouts. What is the process? Is that a
It'd be an
court?
eminent domain
Said
taking
eminent,
at
so that'd be a
that
court.
point, and you'd have, the concern I have is really not the, I think the resolution of the issue of getting the right of way is not a problem. I think you'd have probably pretty much overwhelming support, from residents there, unless they thought they were losing too much of their lawn. But absent that, I think you'd have no difficulty getting the majority of the residents, and the few that you didn't might cost you some money, in terms of legal expense. The bigger issue is that there's gonna have to be some money that gets paid by somebody. And it would presumably fall, as it has in the past when the streets have been brought forward in any community, it falls to the residents on that street. Your point, and this is an issue that bedevils communities across the Commonwealth, it's not just in Hubbardston.
Exactly.
We dealt with this in fact, there's lots of streets in Worcester. You think it's only in small towns, but there's lots of streets in Worcester that can barely pass because they're private ways, and no one's been able to crack the problem. Is there interest in it would have to be a one-time fix. I don't think anybody's gonna want us to sign up for an expense that's gonna come back to them every year. I think your complaint is well taken, that if it's $15,000 or $20,000 and it's every year, that seems a fool's choice, and residents would say, we'll wing it. Might there be interest? Might you go back and talk to folks, or we get together in some kind of offline way and talk to folks about a betterment assessment that perhaps brought it to a standard less than subdivision, but far above where it is now, and that be a betterment assessment over time to residents. Now, I don't know whether that's something that they would be in favor of, but we certainly could explore it and maybe even come up with some draft numbers as to what might be the impact of that. But
So-
in many communities, when you have a sewer line goes through your neighborhood, there is a betterment generated just by that act. It means we've bettered that street in some way. And this would be no different than that. And if there's interest, and if it could be done as the net result would be that it's accepted, not that it's just a better maintained road, but that it's accepted.
Right.
Then if you think that there might be interest in that, I'd be happy to go out and talk to the residents there and just see where we go.
So I had talked to, and I think I communicated this to you guys and Kelly last year. I had talked to Tim, our previous DPW director, about the approximate, a very, very rough cost of what it would take to bring that road up. And I don't know if he was just bringing it up a little bit, or I think he was bringing it up to subdivision standards, which is the minimum accepted road. And he had estimated that the cost, a rough estimate, would be about $250,000.
Yeah, in fact, it was more like $300,000 to $500,000.
There
That's
you
what
go.
the
Yeah.
that's what the emails say.
So it's a lot of money. So I think I agree with Brian. I said we
But
should
it-
resolve this.
But it was also based on bringing the road up
To
to
subdivision
a state standard, a state DOT standard, which is not what we're looking to have happen. We don't want a super highway going through our tiny little mile road. But we do need it to be in a condition where people can safely pass, and our, emergency vehicles can get down there without breaking a leaf spring and all those other kinds of things that are, reasonable to want to have happen on your road. But to spend $500,000 to fix up a road
Doesn't make all that sense.
doesn't make any sense at all.
So it's maybe not all the catch basins and drainage that you may not need, it's just the acceptance of the road, and maybe have the town, plowing it. Do they plow it now, right?
We do, actually,
And
yes.
you need it graded, spring and fall, I imagine. So that would be
And-
the main thing, is getting it graded spring and fall. And maybe they would have to put gravel, not necessarily adding drainage and catch basins. That's
Yeah.
where all the expense would be.
Exactly.
Well, this would the
And-
minimum standard would probably come from the planning board. You guys would determine what the minimum standard would be.
Well, we have the standards already in place, however, there are provisions for waivers to be granted for some of those standards. So,
Right.
I think it's in the best interest of the town, and everybody's concerned about infrastructure, this is an opportunity, and if all the residents agree, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear how many residents are in agreement for the improvements, but it does take I believe 100% in order for it to happen. But if that is achievable, then I don't see why we wouldn't work with the residents to get it done.
We want to make sure we remember that this street will be looked looked at by all the other streets that are in a similar situation. And we'll be here to see you as soon as this one gets resolved. So
Right.
unfortunately for the folks that have come forward first, whatever we resolve has to be thought of as a resolution for a great many streets, not just yours.
And of course, I understand that there are quite a number of private roads that are in Hubbardston, but not all of them are of such as ours is, which does connect, like I said before, to town roads. And there are many of them that do not do that sort of a thing, which is a big issue.
Sir.
Ken Bradford, 23 Streeter. I was wondering if the town currently maintains a number of dirt roads and how that works out? Does it turn
That's
out
my
to be a
understanding we do.
difficult thing, or does it work out well and
I
the
think-
costs are pretty well set?
I mean, there's probably more than this, but the two main ones are a section of Mount Jeff and then all of Halfrey, I know is dirt. Do you aware of any other ones? That's what I said, Halfrey Road.
The end of Old Princeton.
Yeah,
There's a
Mile
few.
Road.
There's a couple.
Country Lane,
Mm-hmm.
it's half tar and half dirt.
So the
But
town
it's a
has some
private road.
experience
Yes, they grade the
maintaining and
roads,
knows
yeah.
the costs and
Yeah.
how it comes out.
The end of Route Road too, they do.
I mean, they can be expensive. I mean,
Well, and
yeah,
it's
I
a
mean,
question of ownership. You're gonna own this. It's
yeah, I
really
mean,
not
dirt
just
dirt
a
roads are not
transfer of
cheap just because they're dirt.
creative
They
roads.
take a
You're
lot of gravel. They take a lot of work
We
to
see
do.
that.
Yeah. So I
I'd
mean,
be happy to meet with you, Debbie, if that could be helpful.
Yeah, I think we probably would be happy to have that. And in the meantime, I don't know how long you expect something like that would take to resolve. But in the meantime, we still, every year, have to bring our road up to an acceptable way for it to be able to be plowed. And so, based on that, I'd like to also suggest that the town be willing to provide us with the service which is called, again, according to your bylaws, temporary repairs to our road, which will allow you to bring our road up to the standard that you have set for us to have it in condition in order for it to be plowed. And that is also state law, chapter 40. And let's see where you guys have it.
That's for a public way, correct?
That's for a private way. Chapter 40 and section C N, I think it is. Yeah. That's the state law. It's also part of your bylaws. Here it is in your bylaws, right here. And so I think what Mr. Bradford was trying to refer to was the fact that, again, you're talking about taking the road over and bringing it up to standards, and we're wondering if, is it not easier to, and less money in order to maintain it or repair it on a regular basis, such as you already have with your other dirt roads that are being used?
right. So, and I have no problem with this, but don't forget that the rest of the bylaw says all costs for such repairs shall be assessed as a betterment upon those properties who benefit from the repairs. So.
Yes.
And then we had talked about that, I think, last year, was that the town can do some of the work, but it will be charged back to the residents, since it is a
And
private
also
road.
some of my understanding that perhaps a betterment won't be charged if we were to provide the materials ourselves, and then.
Yeah, I don't know the intricacies of all that,
Yeah,
but.
so that was something that I believe I read and understood, but I'm not a lawyer, so.
Out of curiosity, what's, is the majority of the residents in favor of this, or do you have people who actually don't want this?
We have a pretty huge
But are there
here.
people who don't want it, in other words?
I can't answer that a real yes or no. All I can tell you is that every single person on our road, except for a new family that just moved in about 2 weeks ago, have been part of this ongoing communication, and everybody has been offered the opportunity to state their opinions, see how they feel. We just had a meeting last Thursday, and nobody has said they don't want that to happen. Everybody wants something to be resolved.
So Brian, what would happen in a situation, and you may not know the answer to this, if we do upgrade the road, make some repairs before the winter and stuff, and it's charged back as a betterment? What if there are 2 or 3 residents that say, I'm not paying that? What happens in that situation?
The process, once you took ownership of completing survey and doing that work, once you took ownership, the betterment process is a legally enforceable.
Okay.
It's not debatable. The question I have for you is this: have you had to raise money? I assume at some point you've raised money to do repairs to the road
Every year we have
every year.
to.
Does everyone contribute?
No.
See, that's the problem. And I don't know what's going to happen we go out and start talking about betterment assessments, but I'm happy to go out and try any number of combinations. It may well be, and I've thought about this for, I've been in this business a long time, it may well be that the standard has to be somewhere between what's there now and subdivision standards, because subdivision standards keep getting better and better, and they're just getting farther and further out of reach.
I don't know that we're looking for subdivision standards, actually.
Right.
We're just looking to have it be,
No, you're not.
prepared in
That's
such
the
a way.
standard that's in the statute. That's usually the standard that's either in the statute or
No, I
law
don't
or
think so.
policy.
But if you
Well,
repair it,
except for-
you wanna obviously do a good enough job, you're not doing it every year
Isn't it-
also,
yeah, isn't it-
you know?
One time.
You know, it can't be an ongoing headache, I don't think, for the town. If it's gonna be done, it should be done it should be done in such a way that it will hold up. Not forever, obviously, 'cause it's a dirt road, but,
Right.
that it will hold up.
So why don't we, I mean, we're not gonna solve this problem tonight. And I don't think anybody's not in agreement to get this over and done with somehow. So why don't we take some time and between Brian and our DPW and the planning board, and we'll have the DPW go out and have Travis go out and maybe just take a look at the road and get his assessment of not subdivision standard, but what does he think needs to be done on that road to make it acceptable for him, at least for the town to take it over. What that would cost, and then we, between the planning board and the board of selectmen and the residents, we can kind of come up with a plan over the next couple of months.
Yeah. Good? Anybody else have something to say? No?
No?
Paul?
Oh.
Not for now.
If
Dennis.
I may, just to Brian's point, you better be prepared to do all the roads under these conditions. So you might as well look at them all now. Not trying to tamper what these folks want, they all pay taxes. I appreciate that, but you might as well look at them all at once. Otherwise, it's gonna end up being.
You mean all the
piecemeal.
private roads?
All the private roads, do it all at once and make your decisions that way. Otherwise, it's gonna be piecemeal, and the town and all the boards are gonna have to go through this, go
Every
through it,
time.
go through it. I'd say do it at
I'm
once.
sorry, I have to disagree with you on that, because you don't know what the residents on every road want or don't want.
I
And
don't.
second of all the private roads do not connect to town
Correct.
roads.
They're
Some of
correct.
them come to an end, and the law is very clear on those private roads. They are not
I
entitled to that
totally
sort of
understand all
benefit.
that. I was stuck with
So-
for 12 years, so I appreciate all that. But the point is that other people on other roads, a couple are already sitting in the room, are already shaking their head. They want theirs looked at. So if I was still on the board, I'd say, look at them all at once. You know, and there's time and scale here to do them all at once. And look at them objectively. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
Well,
we'll
I
work on it.
appreciate your time. Thank
Okay,
you so
thanks for
very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
So I guess probably, well, the first thing was have Travis go out and take a look and, and make a report of what he thinks is going on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I got a work thing going on right now, so I may have to.
That's okay.
No, not yet. Thanks.
At least they came, you had invited them before, you know?
Yeah, no,
See,
I'm
Scott?
glad they all came.
Yeah.
Katie, you're up.
Hey, Carolyn? Hi, Katie.
Hi,
What's up?
I have questions.
So, we.
I know you're shocked.
We mistakenly appointed Katie as special events advisor, and now she's back at us.
Yes, yes. You unleash the devil. No. So I have questions. So I need some guidelines on what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what I need to come and ask your permission for, what I can just be unleashed and do on my own,
Yep.
how much money I can sign for without having to go through you
Yep.
for anything. So I need all that clarified.
Okay. Well, it sounds like what we need to do, because I can't answer it, none of us can answer any
Yeah,
of those
this
questions.
is all new.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put together, what we did, Brian, to pull you up to speed, is Katie put together our 250th celebration, like
And I
by
understand
herself.
you did a good
Yeah,
job, so
I mean,
congratulations.
awesome. So she came to our last meeting, I think, and she had some additional ideas about some maybe additional future events. So we said, you know what, why don't we create
And there's money
this-
left over. There's not much, like $4,000 or $5,000, so.
that may be able to be added to on an annual basis at town meeting or however we decide to go through here. So we sort of just said, okay, special events advisor, Katie Young, but we want to sort of define what she's talking about there. So come up with a few parameters for her role, which would be, you know, what the funding source. We know what the funding source is. We know there's an account already for that, which just needs some verbiage
it's
change.
gotta go to the, and get changed the name.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So that's but it's more of just what you said. So I think we can come up with some guidelines
Okay.
to do that, and then you'll have comments on that to see whether or not some of that makes sense to what you're actually going to be doing or not, and we'll just finalize it.
Okay.
So why don't you prepare us some, like a job description almost?
Okay,
So what you want to do?
okay, so just like bullet points kind
Yeah,
of thing?
just why don't you prepare some of that for us, and we'll think of some things, and we can kind of put it all together. But
Okay.
if you, I'm sure you've been thinking about stuff and have some ideas.
Yeah, I already have stuff planned.
So just put it down as a job
I'm already
description
like
for
12
this
steps
position,
ahead of
and
this.
yeah, just put it together for us, and
Okay.
we can all sit down and approve it as a.
Okay, so
with
come
some
back to
changes.
the next meeting,
Yep.
basically? All right, so I will go have a seat over there, because there's a lot of people in this room, and I'm curious what's going on, because I'm nosy like that. All right, so just come back next month, or
Yeah.
when's the next
Whenever. It
meeting?
doesn't have to be 2 weeks. It can be next month, whenever you want.
Okay,
But every 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I got 2 weeks, all right, I got that. Thank you.
Thanks. And feel free to work with us and Brian throughout the process here to
Yeah.
just, you know, information that we receive prior to meetings is much easier to process than information that we receive at
Okay,
a meeting.
so, yeah, get it beforehand,
Yeah.
and then, so that way you guys can.
We have something to look at and you know, digest prior to us meeting.
Yeah, I know all the office people, except for Brian.
Okay.
He'll know me very
Yes,
soon.
he will.
No doubt about that.
All right, so next item is the interim town administrator process. So, sort of the way it's worded, I'm just gonna sort of explain where we've gone and where we're at, and then you can please chime in at any time. All right. So we now have a, which we're going to, I guess, retroactively vote to this contract.
Yes.
Once we get to the point shortly. But we now will be voting to hire an interim town administrator, which is the process you need to go through when your town administrator leaves, which, as many of us know, Rayanne Siegel resigned her position. So, Brian, if you go into a little bit about what is allowable as far as hiring an interim administrator. I know you've been through it a few times. There's like a database or whatever else. Can you just explain this to people a little bit?
Sure. This would be my sixth and interim assignment since retirement. It is also my second, as you know, run through Hubbardston. I enjoyed my time in Hubbardston. I think Hubbardston benefited from my service in 2011 to 13. So I was happy to come back when folks called.
And just to
The
say,
process.
I know I've told you already, but we were thrilled when you were receptive to coming
Yeah,
back.
no, the process was clean and straightforward. I got an email asking me to come in to interview. I did. We exchanged preliminary interest in rates of pay, and all of which was boiled down to a contract. Important for me to remind you, and certainly the folks at home that will be hearing this for the first time, is that the contract is the same contract that we used in 2012 and 13. So nothing has changed from that.
Even the dollar value.
Including the rate of pay.
Yeah.
The rate of pay was $82 an hour then, it is the same now. So there was no raise in that. I would remind everyone, and I know the board knows this, but I would remind folks at home that in this position, I'm not eligible for any benefits, which normally adds, when you get into health insurance and retirement and all of the other associated benefits, sick time and vacation, adds about 35%. And when you add that 35% to the hourly rates of the two previous town administrators, I'm comfortably in the same range. So it's really a case of paying more in an hourly rate than it is in paying all of the other associated rates. So I expect to be working 2 days a week. Monday would be the long day. Wednesday is looking like more likely the other day. There are some scheduled meetings, including the finance team that has been historically meeting on Wednesday. I don't want to disrupt that, so I'll work on Wednesday. Probably end up averaging 18 to 19 hours, which would put me at about $1,500 a week, well below what we've been paying your other administrators. I also expect, and I know there was comment earlier tonight about using the Collins Center, and if you choose, that's your choice. But I thought we conducted a very robust and successful recruit the last time I was here. We I would expect that I would do the same again and save you that $5 to $8 to $9 or $10,000.
Jamie, we had
But that's
25 to
all.
30 applicants there, remember? We had a lot of applicants
We had much fewer last
this
go
time.
round.
Right. Okay, anyway. Yep.
Anyways, I just think it's, I think we can save you that expense and then adds a little more value to the contract that I'm going to suggest for you. So that's the story. I think you can have an interim come from any, I guess, walk of life, but the majority of us have either spent our careers in municipal management,
No vote on this.
as I have. This is now my, way too many years at this. But my last full-time assignment was 25 years in Holden.
Okay, well, thanks again. Welcome aboard, and we're probably approximating 6 months-ish is what we're talking about
I
now.
think I wrote it so that it would expire before the end of the year, trying to keep a little pressure on all of us
Yeah.
to keep our nose to the grindstone and move on to a full-time position. So I expect to be gone before Christmas, I would hope.
Okay.
Do we have the original contract?
I have
Yeah.
2 signature copies here you would need to vote to
Yep.
approve it and then sign.
So I'm gonna, so we all have copies, we reviewed.
And once they're signed, I'd be happy to distribute to anybody who wants one. So.
Tom?
I thought that the charter said that you can only appoint someone for 30 days. Jamie, you wrote the charter.
I don't have it on me.
The
Okay,
charter
there
says
are-
you have to make an appointment for 30 days,
There.
and then you can reappoint someone after 30 days.
Whatever the
You
charter
can't,
says.
you can't have a contract for 6 months, you can only have a contract just for 30 days.
You can
That's what the new
clarify.
charter says.
Yeah, the charter where I was, I enforced
sec.
for my last contract, and it was signed actually as an annual contract, so I'm not sure that I would defer to you or your legal counsel, but that was not an impediment the last time.
Tom?
Should the town administrator be unable to perform the duties of the office due to absence, illness, or suspension, the Board of Selectmen may appoint a temporary, that's the key word, town administrator. Such temporary appointment shall be made for a period not to exceed 30 days following section 352 shall take effect. 352 says, the board shall designate a qualified person to serve as acting town administrator, different word now, from temporary
Okay.
to acting, and to perform the duties of the office during any period of vacancy exceeding 30 days caused by the town administrator's absence, illness, suspension, removal, or resignation. The appointment shall be for a period not to exceed 180 days. The individual serving as the temporary town administrator under section 351 may, but need not be, appointed as acting town administrator. You have temporary, acting, permanent. 30 days, 180 days, forever.
So,
And their powers vary a little different, I'm not gonna bore you with
so we have our town attorney here tonight, I mean, we are not looking to have. So what was the first one you said?
Well, my point is twofold.
Temporary.
There's no
Temporary.
definition of interim. Interim is not used in the charter, I can't find it.
Okay, so we can change this to
Temporary.
acting town administrator, which would then allow us to do
Well-
a 6-month contract.
That's correct, I think. I'm not
Well, unless you
lawyer.
know more than our attorney, Tom, I'm not
I
sure.
just said I think because I don't think I do know more. Excuse me.
Okay, so is there somewhere in here we can just cross out interim and put
Right here.
acting? Couple places?
Yeah, I think the vote can ask us to draft that.
Sounds good.
Change.
Sounds good.
If that's what. the board
All right, so
wants, it's
I
fine.
will make a motion to accept the contract for Mr. Bullock as presented as acting town administrator from the period of July 6th to December 31st, 2017.
I'll second the motion.
And I just, for discussion, see if you would amend it, subject to modifications
Modification
to
of-
make it adhere to the charter.
Yes.
Yes?
Approved.
Second
yes.
the motion.
Discussion?
No, I think that would give you the ability to do 30-day increments. You could have it worded in the contract, to my knowledge, that way, so that you could say it's for 30 days, up to an endpoint potential of the end of the year.
Yeah.
Town council could advise you better, but I think that would satisfy the wording of the charter and the concerns, I agree.
Sure. Tom?
You started this conversation by saying you were gonna retroactively vote to hire.
I just didn't know, because he started on like Thursday or something, so I didn't know if we had to actually bring it back to that day.
When did you actually hire him?
No, we would retroactively vote to approve the hiring to back to some date that he started in here, so that's
So
what,
is that Thursday?
I guess that was Thursday, was the first day you were in here? Thursday, so, Thursday.
I don't understand the retroactive vote to hire. I thought a hire had to be a hire in public. So you figure that out.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in on those days, but we'll hire you today.
Carolyn, do you have any advice for that for Mr.
Well,
Robinson?
the provision in the charter that was read, you could appoint somebody for a temporary position for 30 days. And then you can appoint someone as an acting town administrator for 180 days. You could arguably have, say, prior to tonight, you could consider that to have been temporary, some sort of temporary appointment based on whenever the decision was made to bring Ryan aboard.
Yeah, so the decision was made to keep the town running, you know, and he was unbelievably willing to come in literally immediately when we were needing him. So I guess if we can sort of figure out some of these gymnastics here, we will, and then whatever's appropriate, make sure that that goes into the final record.
Hi, Danielle from High Street, Eric Callahan, by the way. When was there ever a meeting where where it was on the agenda saying, town administrator's resigning, we're gonna meet to discuss going after an interim town administrator or acting? Like, did that ever get any kind of public notice, any kind of way of towns knowing that that was happening?
No, I think to recount how it went was, and again, don't quote me on this exactly, but generally was, okay, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff that went in there as far as what she had been offered and what we could potentially offer and not, but that sort of went nowhere. But I think she actually said to me, I've contacted some service and there are a couple people who are available.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing Brian from
Oh, Brian was fine.
right, that's what I mean. But just knowing him that and
But
that he
I'm
was
just wondering,
potentially
like,
available.
Okay, say, like, I quit my job. My boss then would have to meet with my team or whatever.
That's what we're doing
say,
tonight. No, so I talked to him and said, hey, would you be interested in this position? And so he said, yes, I would. And so the point of what we're voting on a contract, like 3 of us could vote against this tonight.
I think you missed a step. Like, I think there should have been a meeting in the beginning where it said, we need to find an interim town administrator. This is what we're gonna do. You could go into an executive session or whatever to work out the contract. But for at least a week, if not more, like the 21st until today, no one in town knew you're losing our town administrator and looking for another one.
Tom?
If you're saying, what you're saying is correct, and why was the Attorney Dineski emailing Mr. Bullock 2 days after Ann gave you her notice?
Say again?
Attorney Dineski was emailing Brian Bullock. I was copied on the emails on June 26th, 2 days after Ann.
Dineski?
Don't know.
Well, I have copies of the emails.
Yeah, I'd like to see it, 'cause I have no idea who he is.
Okay, my answer is I have no idea.
Okay.
So we were just trying to keep the town running. We knew Brian and knew we'd be coming to a meeting soon that we could talk about his contract and have public forum and all that sort of stuff. So, Tom.
The issue isn't temporary, acting, interim. I think the issue is whether things are done out in the public or whether they're done behind the curtain. And you stepped out of a meeting last Wednesday, I believe, and you were quoted in the newspaper as saying, Mr. Bullock has a 180-day open-ended contract.
Pending
No.
approval by the select board. That's the intention.
Didn't sound like that.
I don't see a signed contract, Tom.
Yeah, we don't even have it.
So
This is-
Rayanne gave her notice, and we contacted Mr. Bullock as somebody who has worked in the town before. We held an executive session last Wednesday to interview Mr. Bullock to see if he's interested in anything, hash out any details, and here's the contract that we're presented with right here to sign.
I think there's a concern. We'll probably talk about some of it.
Well, I'd like to hear your concern.
Well,
Because this all happened very quickly, so I wanted to say there's nothing going on behind the scenes, but the the resignation of Rayanne was a short notice, and it happened quickly. So we needed, as Dan said, to keep the town running. So we're happy to have an open discussion right here, where nothing's been in the secret. This has only been going on for about 2 weeks, from the time of 3 weeks since time of her notice. We only meet every 2 weeks.
Right, so you filed a couple of additional open meeting law, records request informations today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I was going through my emails, because some of the request was from, like, all discussions, emails, you know what it is. I think I have one. So it's not like there was a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes in discussions with any parties besides those sort of sitting at the table. So, and that being specifically Brian on his availability and willingness to come on over here. So,
I hear you. I'm also interested in keeping the town running, but I'm also interested in open government. It's a thing I value very, very highly. I am extremely sympathetic to what this person has said about, was it done with the public's opportunity to understand what is going on. That's highly valued by me, and I think it's highly valued by the public. And I'll stop right there.
okay.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Mary Ellen Shaughnessy. What was the official date of Rayanne's resignation?
So let me go through the process a little bit. This is what happened. Rayanne called me one day and said, I got a better offer somewhere. I said, no. She's like, yep, benefits too and whatever. And I said, well, when you gotta, she's like, I gotta let him know tomorrow. I was like, oh, can you just hold on? And I actually called Carolyn. And I said, do we have any options? Again, I understand what happened at town meeting, okay? But this was new information that we had had. This was not the same situation of her saying, you know what, I'm gone unless you, this was, I have another offer. And so as employer, theoretically, it was like, okay, what options do we have? So I called the attorney, I said, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? Is there anything we can offer, knowing what happened at town meeting? And Carolyn, very, up front, off the bat, first said, there's something you can do that's gonna be a political nightmare, and so, okay, we don't really wanna do that. But there are also,
What was that?
there are options with benefits. So I guess, and we didn't go through a lot of details. This was just sort of a high-level conversation about, but I guess the select board can modify benefits of an employee. Okay, so simply something like that. And I don't even know what the numbers were. We weren't really crunching them all. So we decided to and spoke to Rand. I said, hey, can you hold off? You want to come into an executive session? However, let's make it open. So, and again, I couldn't make her agree to anything, but I said, if this is the way you want to do it, we'll see what the options are out in open session, though. So we're not in executive session, so people can see what potentially we're trying to do. And she said, yeah, maybe, Anyway, so that was originally maybe going to happen, and then it went away. She finally said, I'm done, and that's it. So that's generally the whole process of where we're at. And then, so to answer the question, the same day that she called me and said, I got my whatever, she said, I'm going to send you a resignation letter, of this date that will only be applicable if I officially we can't work something out. I think that was the terminology, something like that. So yeah.
Did you meet with
So
her?
the verbal resignation was on what date? The verbal conversation?
I believe that was the 21st of June.
The 21st?
Is that like a Wednesday or Thursday?
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday, is that right? 21st? Tom?
And then she
Oh, sorry.
tendered something in writing after that?
That same day.
That same
She
day?
sent it, and it's part of, I think it's the email, maybe one or two that I'll be providing as part of the
Records request.
Public records request.
records request that is basically, I, Mr. Glanty, I respectfully, whatever, rescind my position. And then that was subject to, us not working it out. And by the time she had met here in executive session, it was not something that she wanted to pursue any further, of working something out with
So
us.
what executive session was that? Like, the 21st was the resignation day. And
It
then
was-
you went in executive session?
It was the following Monday.
The 26th was
Right.
the executive session. So then
Right. So she would,
the
she
July 5th executive session was to discuss Brian
was to
Willis'
interview
contract.
Brian.
Correct.
So you
Was
did
this
go,
the
my
track?
question was, did you go into executive session to make a decision
That was the same executive session that we met with Rayanne that she, we couldn't work out an offer to keep her here.
And so you met in that executive session and decided to amend her contract so she.
To allow her to give a 3-week notice rather than a 6-week notice.
That was what you guys voted in that executive session?
We
Yes.
agreed to her terms, which
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
you know,
Why did you have the finance committee person there, chairman of the finance committee?
I respect Susan's, I think we respect Susan's input. That's not, I'm looking for the right word, input.
I saw them.
Yeah.
No,
Respect Susan's input, and we asked,
let me add one thing to that, because there was another potential, in speaking to the attorneys, one of the other options, potentially, I think, was a transfer?
a reserve fund transfer.
Reserve fund transfer. So again, we didn't go very, we're just, whatever, we,
You just kind of, just kicking the ball around.
yeah, that's right.
with her.
Just trying to figure out, and so,
And Susan's also an attorney, so, you know, we asked her to come and be present at that meeting to make sure that what we're doing, anything that was discussed was proper, but, you know, nothing came out of it, which is why Rayanne did not rescind her resignation. He kept her resignation on June 21st.
So just be clear, what came out of that executive session is that you modify her contract to allow her to leave just whatever.
I guess, I mean, we agreed to her terms, so that's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, so it would be a 3-week notice instead of 6.
I mean, you know, she's got a life, as well, that,
I'm just wondering.
you know, that she had a certain date that she was gonna have to start, or she wouldn't be able to get her position, so, you know, human stuff.
Respectfully, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So the amendment to allow her a 3-week instead of 6-week notice was granted so that she could start a new position elsewhere?
Correct.
Okay. And what effect did that change in timing on the notice have as far as any benefits or paid back pay or beneficial
The only thing it allowed her to do was to take her vacation, that she had some accrued, so she didn't get any extra pay. There was no pay, there was no severance, there was nothing involved with it. The only thing that allowed her to do was to take the remaining week or whatever it was of vacation that she had at the end.
Which is what our previous town administrator did as well, on the way out. Anita Shipers did the same thing.
But I think, so she'd already approved that vacation time, was already considered vacation time.
Right, she did not get paid for anything in the next year. It was whatever vacation time she had accrued, which wasn't
Which
much.
they have to do anyway.
Which, so she was, because the contract says you can't, the contract, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but it says unless you give 6 weeks notice, you can't either get paid out or take that vacation time.
I think, because I know like once pay is categorized as vacation time, you can't change that into anything else, you have to pay it out. You know, like if you resign your job, whatever vacation time you accrue gets paid out.
Right, so it was just a matter of semantics, really, that we agreed to let her go in the 3 weeks rather than the 6 weeks.
And she had done the math based on that and submitted that to her future employer or whatever and said, this is the date, you know, and they said, okay, well, you gotta start this day. And it worked out to be whatever, July, today, I think.
Well, as long as you didn't get all those sick days paid out.
No, she got, no, there was no additional pay whatsoever for anything. It was just a matter of allowing her out of the contract and allowed her to take that last week of vacation, from whatever it was, her last day of work was what, the 6th or whatever it was, like
Yeah,
that. 5th. The last day was the 5th. The second executive session, which was on the 5th, again, was to meet with Mr. Bullock and see if he had interest in the job, see if he had,
Yeah, that was the one, I saw the executive session and I didn't know what it was for on the agenda specifically.
so it was to meet with Mr. Bullock, see his interest in it, price, work hours, what he expects, what our expectations are. We agreed that it'd be a good fit, and then we have a contract here to sign now.
Ish.
Street people anyway.
All right, so we were in discussion on a motion.
Well, Carolyn, what's your take on having to appoint Mr. Bullock for 30 days versus a 6-month acting town administrator?
I think really what seems to fit the most under the charter, I don't have it in front of me, but based on what I heard Mr. Robinson reading, it appears that, you know, that a temporary situation is when somebody's just, there is a short-term absence, such as someone's going to be on
Maternity
extended
leave or
vacation,
something.
Yeah, yeah.
medical leave, something like that, and they're expected to come back, versus resignation seems to apply, seems to trigger the acting title, so I would suggest you go with that terminology.
And that would allow us for a 6-month appointment.
That was the intent.
That's right, you were on the charter committee.
That was the intent.
Okay.
It was a short-term vacancy for whatever.
Health
personal-
problems,
Personal leave or.
Right.
Temporary.
Temporary.
And I don't know if you guys have probably seen in the paper somewhat, recently, but there have been a fair amount of town administrators leaving different places. And so, that means a fair amount of interim or acting town administrators have been being employed as well. So I think, thinking back, being able to get someone with Brian's qualifications sort of sooner rather than later, sort of at least agreed to the concept of being part of the town again, was still the right thing to do in the process. I understand everyone's concerns here. I get it, but I still think we're in a good position.
Don't you have to appoint someone before you can negotiate contract?
No. Carolyn?
No, usually there's something that they happen on a parallel track because you don't necessarily get to an appointment unless you can agree on the terms in which they can do it.
All right, so I'll just repeat my motion to approve the contract for the acting town administrator, not interim, and we'll make sure we make those changes in the contract from a period of July 6th to December 31st, 2017.
And I've already seconded, so it doesn't need to be.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 So Brian, we'll sign these and then we'll redo the
We'll get it
wording, and
redo-
then next
we'll
time
get you
we'll
a clean copy.
we'll sign it again.
You want to start over there and pass this way?
Sure.
Here. We'll take the whole folder.
Problem, Tom? You have a problem with anything? Question? Concern? Oh, I thought you were addressing us. Sorry.
Here's the other one.
Want me to read Jamie's note?
Yes.
I also want to read into the record a letter we received from Jamie Pitney.
No.
Date 7 July 2017. Dear Board of Selectmen members, I'm writing this letter in response to the recent departure of our town administrator, Rayanne Siegel. It is most unfortunate that we as a town are in search of yet another town administrator, our third to hold this position, not including interims, in less than 2 years. As I have followed the circumstances surrounding the departure of our two most recent TAs, through town meeting attendance, viewing multiple board meetings in person or online, the press and social media, and by discussions with people in the know that I trust with impartial views, it has become clear to me that something needs to be done before we hire our next TA. It is my belief that there is a common theme or issue occurring with respect to the tenure and departure of our town administrators that has an underlying root cause. To hire our next TA without addressing this root cause, I believe, will be a disservice not only to the incoming TA, but to the town of administration, to the town of Hubbardston at large. Therefore, it is my recommendation and request that the Select Board take whatever actions necessary to formally investigate the disturbing trend of TA turnover. Further, I recommend that you use any and all powers afforded to you through Mass General laws, the town charter, and bylaws to ensure that the root cause is identified and addressed appropriately. The outcome of this action should be fair, fast, decisive, transparent, and final, thus allowing for the formation of a TA search committee that can confidently do its work without the cloud of this issue looming over it. I would be willing to serve the town once again on a TA search committee, which would be my third since 2012. However, I would need to know and be assured that the search can be done right, well, and productively. Thank you to all the members of the board for your time to read my letter and considering my proposal. Your servant leadership to the town is greatly appreciated. Sincerely, Jamie Pitney.
Thanks, Jamie. So before we sort of ultimately move on, we sort of need to talk about where we're at with setting up a search committee.
You have a question right here.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Question for Mr. Pitney.
Sure.
Can you tell us what the underlying cause is?
I have a theory, but honestly, I would rather not. I'd rather that it be discovered independently, and with whatever means that the board decides to take. Respectfully, I mean, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Okay. So just to finish that statement there, we're going to have to set up another TA search committee, and we talked about getting right to that. Now, considering submitted as well, there are certain steps that we can take if we choose to move in the process that what Jamie was talking about, but we're still gonna need to find members no matter what, whether it starts in a week, whether it starts in a month, you know, that sort of thing. So I guess we'll have to.
I was looking at probably making some appointments, for this board to be looking at making some appointments in your August, one of your August meetings, the first one preferably. That implies that you're gonna get a solicitation out sooner than that.
Yep.
But if there's a feeling that there's a, and I'm not close enough to Hubbardston over the past 6 months or 8 months to know, if there's a feeling that you need to spend some time, rather than just looking at the job description and saying, pretty much okay. If there's a need to do more soul searching, if you will, then you want to build that time in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate. I don't think it can ever hurt to have. Sometimes the answers are, it's financial, and sometimes the answers are much more deep-seated than that. I've enjoyed my time here, and believe it or not, I'm still enjoying it, even tonight. But there's something going on that's causing a problem, and you gotta get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
This-
Yeah.
Did we ever do like exit interviews? I mean, I imagine Rayanne's, there's not a lot of mystery as to what would drive her to.
She's gonna do one. She hasn't yet.
But like with Anita, was it just a better opportunity in another town or better work?
I can't speak to that.
Life?
We
So
didn't.
do an
We didn't
exit
have an exit
interview?
interview.
I might offer, I had that conversation with Anita, and she's free to speak her own mind, obviously. I don't pretend to know everything that went into her thought process. The one thing that she does like about the West Boylston opportunity is that there's just more financial resources for her to be doing more things. And that's not something you can solve. So there has to be that level of folks, and there are, who enjoy working at this level. Frankly, it's a very precise skill set. I had no idea how difficult small town government work was until I did it.
Yeah.
So it's a skill set, and there are folks out there. Our job is to find them.
So I did ask, just to restate that, I did ask Rayanne if she wanted to do one, and she said, "Do I?" So things change. That was a week ago or whenever it was, but so I'm planning on contacting her and.
You might be able to get visions from the two of them of different layers that we just don't see.
Yeah, no, I can reach out to Anita as well, and just sort of after in whichever order, and just sort of see, I don't know, see if there's common themes.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
There's been a tremendous turnover of personnel
I know.
in these two buildings. You might want to ask Tim Kilhart for an exit interview.
We did it.
Amy De La Roche for an exit interview. Or Audrey Brooks. Audrey Brooks. There's a half a dozen
Janet
names.
Bezewski?
Janet,
Yeah.
You might want to ask. And maybe
We could
we'll get
generate
to
a
the
list for you. I bet there's 15 in a year. Certainly.
Okay.
All right.
So next item, signature of Hub of the Hub license. Tony, you got that?
We already approved it.
Yeah.
Yes, and ABCC approved it, so.
Okay.
now you have to sign this.
Can I just ask what kind of license?
Sure. This is the Hub of the Hub.
Is that the next item?
Wine and malt.
That's the
Wine and malt, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
We-
the
Wheeler
old Wheeler store.
Oh, that's exciting.
All right, appointment meeting for FinCom. There's nothing. We're not going to do that tonight, right?
No, let's pass over that one.
Okay.
So we're gonna pass over item 9. 10 is wage authorizations and appointments. So we've got, what we got here, Tanya?
What's that?
Leroy Lahane,
Yes.
per diem mart driver. Tricia Burke, land use and planning board clerk. And Mark Dimick, alternate planning board member.
All right, so we can. So I'll make a motion to approve the wage authorization for Leroy Lahane, per diem mart driver.
Second it.
Discussion?
Oh, and you need the retroactive date, right?
Red
One
Barrel.
sec. No, you go ahead. Actually, while we're doing discussion, and she's looking for that?
Oh.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have it right
Barbara.
here.
I was just, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, on the Martin driver that you just hired, I know that I'm not in charge of the Martin anymore, but I think I'd like to meet him, since he's gonna be working with seniors, and a lot of times the
sure we can.
And find out if, basically have a copy of maybe the times he's driving. I have people that, call and say, geez, is he picking me up or not, or whatever, so, and I know, like, a lot of times you're not here on Fridays, right?
Right.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion. I'll still make my motion to approve the wage authorization for Leroy Lahane, retroactive 6/27/17.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. I'm chair now, so you gotta make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't see you over there.
It's okay. Hi, Tom Robinson, Brigham Street. If I hear correctly, it's not whether Mr. Lahane is gonna be successful as a driver or not. It has to do with the coordination of him to the people he serves. Now, does he serve anybody other than seniors? It seems to me that perhaps the organization chart could be modified, and I don't know any of this, but is that the way it used to be?
Yeah, I used to be, yeah.
So I'm sure that we can. I'm
we should
sure.
consider that.
I am sure that Mr. Bullock will be able to arrange a sit down between our council of aging director and our Mart driver, our new Mart
Well,
driver that just started last week.
I'm focusing in on the organization structure.
We had an organizational issue with the Mart a while ago that was changed, so I think the board right now is happy with that, and if there needs to make a change, then our administration can make that recommendation to us.
Good. I'm glad it's considered.
So you need another motion for the, Patricia
Land
Burke?
use clerk.
Okay, make a motion to authorize the appointment of Patricia Burke, land use and planning board clerk. This will be also retroactive
6/29.
to what?
6/29.
Retroactive to 6/29.
I'll second that.
Comment, Vin?
Everybody's very happy with Patricia, so it's good that she's aboard. My question is, what are the chances of increasing her hours for the building inspector as well as the planning board? We're stuck, I think, at 16 or 8. What is it, time is 16?
I think it's 16 and a half.
16 and a half. It's just so busy, Put that on the table. If we can come up with some more funding, it'd be great.
Yeah, Brian, maybe put that on Brian's to-do list.
Sure.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then Mark.
I'll make a motion to appoint Mark Dimick as alternate planning board member.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so we have year-end line transfer requests.
Does this just require a motion or?
What is the proper procedure for this, Brian, for line item? It's just a motion to approve the presented,
As presented?
as presented.
Okay, yeah. Make a motion to approve the year-end line transfer request as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Remembering this is not new money, this is transfer.
This is
Yeah.
transfer between lines, right? All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm gonna skip over committee updates. Now, discussion and vote take action on 2 open meeting law complaints filed by Tom Robinson on July 3rd and July 5th, 2017. So Carolyn, what is the appropriate forum for this?
The appropriate form is designated received 2 open meeting law complaints. One for dated July 3rd, one July 5th. The board has to actually meet and respond to that within 14 business days. And typically it requires the board then has to discuss it and figure out what they think the appropriate response to those complaints would be. The response can either be submitted by the posting an executive session and not necessarily putting on the posting notice that, you're going to convene an open session first and, then go into executive session. I just wanna state that with respect to the first one, it was received or dated July 3rd. And, the complaints are supposed to be brought within 30 days. This dates back to a May 15th meeting of the board, so it's beyond your 30 days. And, it also names that in addition to it being against the Board of Selectmen, it also names the town administrator. The town administrator is not subject to the open meeting law, certainly the Board of Selectmen is. So, with respect to that one, it is late, but then when we go to the July 5th complaint, that has to do with a complaint with respect to the meeting that the board held that very night, it was certainly within the 30 days. And again, if we look at the way the board posted the meeting, the only action item that was listed was an executive session. And the complaint does list reference to the open meeting law guideline published by the Attorney General's office that does encourage that when the only thing that is on an agenda is an executive session, that the board, as a matter of course, would also would include on the notice that an open session first, because as you know, the board has to convene an open session
Which we did,
first.
which we did.
Well, this, I think procedurally, if we just go through it for a moment, you have to convene an open session first. You have to take a vote to go into executive session and state the purpose for which you're going into executive session, and then you need to take a roll call vote to do that. And then typically, the board would then announce whether or not they're going to come back into open session for the purpose of taking up other business, or whether the board's going to be coming back into open session for the sole purpose of adjourning, depending on how it falls on your agenda. So, if I might just ask, procedurally,
We did all
was
that.
that done?
Yes, all of that was done.
I have draft minutes of that executive session from July 5th. Has that been prepared yet?
No.
Okay. Then we'd have to incorporate that into the response to
Sure.
the Attorney General's office that, going forward, it would be a better practice to put an open session on the posting notice, but procedurally, it sounds as though you at least
Sure.
did follow that.
Because I can say that our reporter from the Gardner News was there, and Mr. Robinson was there. They heard us convene the session. They heard us take a roll call vote to go into executive session for the listed exemption 2. And Mr. Robinson actually came to that meeting with a open meeting law complaint already filled out and filed online before he was there and presented it right to us as we took our vote.
But,
It's actually after
If
we,
you're, we're just gonna take comments right now, I think, from,
so please,
I'll leave it to the chair.
we'll wait for press till later.
so, but like, so he knew about
Go ahead.
it, he showed up. I looked at it, and granted, I admit, I read it quickly, and I thought it was going to be negotiations, so I didn't even bother to think of it. But anyone else, without knowing that our town administrator resigned, without knowing that you were well, you would have if I read it correctly, realized it was a non-union position that we were negotiating.
Right.
How did that not violate open meeting law? You didn't let the people know that that's what the meeting was about.
So there's, my understanding for many years of the open meeting law, and if you actually read the open meeting law, there is no requirement to explain exactly what that is for. That's at the discretion of the chair. After the executive session is done, then if the chair declares that those talks are not protected at any point, that point can be released. We have never I can tell you many, many years, ever told people on executive sessions, oh, we're negotiating a solar contract. It's just,
Oh, yeah, you have. I mean, like, they've done the DPW guy. I was here for the meeting when they went into executive session there. We knew it was with the DPW guy, not the current, the past. So that has happened, where people in the meeting knew what the executive session was. I would assume if I had known, if it was an open session at all, I just thought it was gonna be closed the entire time, I would have seen Mr. Bullock sitting there waiting to go into executive session. And at least been able to formulate that, yep, we're hiring a town administrator. You know what I mean? I mean, you understand, I know it's a splitting of the hairs, but you understand the semantics of it.
so I don't know how this got in. How is this? So there's agenda items. So here's an agenda from the planning board, Mr. Robinson.
That's right, that's good there.
Right, but your agenda just doesn't put open session on it, just says agenda, executive session.
That's exactly right. We were at fault. Go ahead and file an open meeting.
I don't wanna file an open meeting.
However-
frivolous.
however, Let me explain. You made it sound like my coming to the meeting with it already filled out was in some way sinister. It wasn't. Because my open meeting law complaint is about the posting. Be very careful to understand what I'm talking about, the posting.
So, fair enough, so we have.
I found out by reading the open meeting law, and the time we made that mistake, I believe it's June 12th
And June 15th.
We were advised to do that by Rayanne Siegel and the town attorney. I found out that they advised us wrong. I came to you on the 3rd, knowing that the meeting of the 5th was posted. I came to you on the 3rd with a late one, which you could theoretically throw in the trash. And I gave you the opportunity to read my complaint, think about your posting, and modify your posting for the 5th. If you had done that, gone.
So I gotta ask you.
Now let me finish.
Okay, fair enough.
I go to the meeting, I submit mine on the 3rd. I know it's late. I know it doesn't have to go anywhere. You could just say to me, Tom, too bad, you're late. Slap it down. But if you read it, you would have recognized, perhaps, and that was my hope, that your 5th was also improperly posted, just as the planning board had improperly posted something. And I learned from that, and I was trying to share it with you.
So-
So let me finish.
No,
No,
It's
hold
Michael's
on,
turn.
hold on, you know,
No, no, no.
No, he said something else, and I
No,
want
no,
to finish my
you don't,
discussion.
no, you don't get to. Okay, I'm gonna give
Oh,
him
I
an
don't get to
opportunity.
finish.
You
Tom,
will after this.
So let me ask you something.
You
So,
will after
little
this.
dialogue here. You submitted something on the 3rd, an open meeting law complaint. So remind, none of us are full-time employees. We're volunteers.
Neither am I.
Neither are you. We have jobs. So you've submitted sometime on the 3rd, which I didn't see. The 4th is the 4th of July holiday. No one's around. And then the 5th, you show up after work and go to an open meeting, and there you are already prepared. Perhaps if you knew that this was an issue that we've all been advised improperly about, why couldn't a simple conversation to say, hey guys, I have read and learned that the way that we've all been posting executive sessions is wrong. Why would you submarine us by putting in an open meeting law violation on sometime on July 3rd, which I don't think any of us saw, then you have a holiday, and then we come in on the 5th after a day of work to do an executive session and then slap us with another one. So,
Can I explain?
Sure.
You asked the question, why did I do it this way? I walked into your meeting on the 5th. I was greeted by Mr. Williams, who said, what are you doing here? This is an executive session. And I reminded him that it was a public meeting. I had the right to be there. Then other members came in, and before you voted to executive session, I said, careful here, I think it's a violation. You voted anyway, and you told me to leave.
Well,
And let me finish, please.
okay.
I stood up and I walked over to your table with my little black folder, and I said, but you're in violation. And Mr. Stoddard said, Mr. Robinson, you're always giving us a hard time. If you think
You are.
we're in violation, then you go ahead and submit an open meeting law complaint.
Why are you talking
And
like that?
that's because that's the way he talked to me. I'm raising my voice,
No,
Be an
he
adult
didn't.
here.
characterizing him. And so, I did.
So,
So let me, can I just,
Go ahead.
this is just so brutal. But basically, I guess following up on how we weren't really submarined and just my opinion of it, I hear you. Like what Michael just said there about, giving us some advance notice. But in that moment, knowing sort of the adversarial sort of way that things were, as we were
It
packed in the,
wasn't adversarial
no.
at all Until Mr. Stoddard.
Okay,
Came
but
at me.
still, we don't know.
came at you?
We don't.
Were we at the same meeting?
We don't know whether or not that's actually true. We can't just, not that you're not a smart guy and all that stuff, but we don't know that that's actually true and can just take you for your word right there and then modify language.
I have a suggestion.
I mean, that's
Let
a
the
tough-
AG rule on it. I'm done.
great.
So do you want us to file an open meeting law against the planning board? I mean, I don't have any intention
Go
to,
ahead.
because it's just childish and stupid, but I think we can all learn from this instead of having
That's
this,
exactly my point.
instead of having this very frivolous relationship between yourself, Mr. Robinson, and perhaps everybody else who works in the
These are
town.
not frivolous things. We've had many questions here tonight about how the appointment of the new town administrator came into existence.
Excuse
So
me,
it's-
Michael, that was an insightful remark. Can't let that go. You're saying he has a bad relationship with everyone in town. That's out of line.
I didn't say everyone in town. I said everyone here.
That's not what you said.
Yes, it is.
Well, perhaps for good reason.
Excuse me, excuse me.
So I don't want to get into this back and forth.
Yeah.
We don't have a good relationship. I understand that you are trying to split hairs. I think it can be done a different way. We can take that up at a different time, offline out of the meeting. We see it, we posted it incorrectly. Your own board has posted it incorrectly.
Yep.
We have learned from it. It will now be posted in open session. Procedurally, it was done correctly. We were in open session. There was 2 people there. You heard us going to a roll call vote. So we will make sure that it's posted correctly. We'll make sure the planning board, I'm sure, has learned to post it correctly, and we'll move on.
Tom?
I'd like to hear Christine Smith, because she was the one there, as well as Tom.
What's that? Okay,
Who was
Christine.
it?
Can I just make a clarification? Yes, I did hear you guys going. I just don't want something being said about me without me responding. Yes, I did hear you go into open, bring it to order, and that was correct. You did go into executive session, but when you returned out of executive session, you did not take a vote to return to open session to adjourn. That was lacking.
No, we didn't have to, because we said we were going to be entering executive session without the possibility of re-entering open session.
Still got to come out and adjourn. Officially.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Let's let the AG talk.
Okay?
But
I mean,
other than
this
that,
is ridiculous, guys. We just need to get some stuff done around here. It is so disruptive and unnecessary. This sort of a posting in just getting in the way of town government and the way it's going, we're trying here. This is nothing sinister.
So when you were sitting out in the hallway listening to us, you didn't hear that said? Cause you
What?
sat outside our meeting, and we had an executive session meeting,
The only thing I
and
heard,
listened to
you guys
everything.
came out of it.
But you just said you didn't hear us take a roll
Adjourn.
call.
No, I did, no, everything you guys said up to that point was okay. I mean, that was
See,
not.
so she did hear everything.
I did. No, I said when you came out of executive session, I didn't hear
So you could hear us, basically.
Could you hear the discussion they were having during the executive
No.
session, I think is what he's inferring.
No,
But you didn't, okay.
no.
So how do you know we didn't
Yeah,
adjourn?
exactly, that's
'Cause you
my
didn't
whole point.
come into you didn't reconvene open session and convene the meeting.
Because we okay,
Do you
well,
know what I mean?
I do, but we didn't need to do that because of the way we always do it around here as far as not coming back into open session. It's just a procedural thing we do all the time. That's completely okay. But you're right. Mr. Robinson's correct. We'll let the Attorney General rule on our, egregious act. So, okay, that is discussion. So we passed over committee updates.
All right, wait, so we have to appoint someone to write in response to the AG, and I would appoint Carolyn
Yep.
to do that.
And
I
her
was just-
point of contact being Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you needed from us, Carolyn?
Yes.
We have to take a vote on that.
No, I'll make just to make sure we don't get another posting, I'll make a motion to appoint Carolyn as our response writer to the open meeting request and have Brian be the point of contact for the Board of Selectmen.
Second my motion.
Discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just gonna, sorry, I have a work thing I'm sort of dealing with here, but committee updates,
Want to skip over?
I'm looking at them
Okay.
real quick to see if there's anything I need to update you guys on, and there really isn't. The task force, I guess, is the only really active one right now, between the building committee and town center committee are sort of on their own paths, but the QRSD task force is still sort of active, and we are we'll be working with Brian to figure out how to retain a facilitator to spend that $100,000 or the right way to spend it. And just, there's probably gonna be, because it came up at our task force meeting, which was with the school committee, that, I think it was the finance committee member of maybe OCAM who said, hey, this was to somebody's point before, I think even Tom to start off the meeting, there's not enough money forever for the schools and for the towns to just run operationally and efficiently. So, can we talk about regionalization, district-wide sort of thing? So, and again, that's like regionalizing a town administrator, or regionalizing a town administrator, additional opportunities for it. So what that spurred in is, and I sort of agreed to sort of take the point on it, which I haven't done yet, is reaching out to all 5 select boards and FinComs and saying, hey, do you want to come to Hubbardston for a meeting?
I think Templeton, or one of the towns, a couple of towns have just regionalized their town
They have, and there's other options too. It's just all trying to drive revenues down. So, I mean, drive revenues up. The revenues that we're getting, utilizing them better.
Yeah.
Right. So that's pending, and that's something that will, be everybody will know when that's coming when it comes. So anyway, other committee stuff can wait till next time.
Can I just make one suggestion?
Sure.
If you guys talk about regionalizing things, I can't even remember what town it was, but they regionalized and they had a police chief that oversaw the police department and the fire department, and it ended up a nightmare because of that. So don't do that. Like regionalize maybe a police chief, regionalize maybe a fire chief, but not one person for both groups.
I think what we're talking about, what we talk about a lot at the task force is how it's, and I feel it too. I live in Hubbardston. My kids go to school here or whatnot, but we're all so very provincial, and we're so all very protective of our own communities, and rightfully so. But since the Quabbin district is a joined district, to try to just further on that a little bit, to just spitball and see if there are other options with everyone in the room, because we did get all the towns together 2 years ago to start the task force when we got all the select boards to sign a letter that says, Dr. Marshall, please give us a 5-year plan. And so that spurred the beginning of the task force because they basically said we can't do that. So this furthers that, I think, as far as reaching sort of out to all the towns again.
And like, didn't one of the towns just, and Claudia, I love you and I hope you get your senior center, so I'm not trying to take away from that, but didn't one of the towns just regionalize or get permission to use the Barry Senior Center?
Hardwick.
Okay. And so some of them are doing it already.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. I want you guys to have your own.
All right. So that's no minutes. Old business. Anyone? Pat?
You're on, May 15th.
We'll pass over that.
Okay, alright.
Michael, anything else? Other business? Christine, do you have any? So we're at the public press question and answer time. So anyone free to ask any questions, or Christine, if you have any additional ones? No. Okay. Well, that ends our meeting. So I guess we'll take a.
So we have two separate executive sessions tonight?
Yes.
For different reasons, different people?
There's only a need for one, so you can cross out one of those.
Okay.
Right?
So just one?
There's only need for one that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session for exemption 1 to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or discuss the discipline or dismissal of complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, individual, and that we have no intention to come back to public session
So
afterwards.
we just discussed ad nauseum the terminology that we left off of the executive session there, that whether or not it was necessary to specify a reason. I believe you said it's encouraged to do that, but not necessarily required.
It depends on the reason you're going into executive session.
All right.
But you always have to state one of your purposes and exemptions under section 21A.
Which we've done that, so I think we're good. We don't have to modify this as it is, as you just heard it.
Session, how hard's that?
What's that?
Close the general session.
Yeah, no, I don't want to. I can't. I don't have time.
Well, it's not simple, because we've gotten open meeting law complaint about how we read the exemption, so we want to make sure with
We're
the
reading the
attorney here that
exemption.
it's, well, all right.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave it as
So
is.
Carolyn, this is okay.
Your purpose for this one
Is exemption one.
Is exemption 1 to hear complaints against public officials.
Okay.
Perfect. With no intent to come back to public after.
Second the motion.
All right.
Other than to adjourn.
Other than to adjourn.
Okay.
And then roll call.
Yep. Mike?
Yes.
Dan? Yes.
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 Okay. Thanks, everyone.
See you, Jamie.